Welcome Form 3B to this part 2 of in total 3 videos, and this is also part 2 of in total 3 videos about different types of government. That is the topic of this video, different types of government. And as always, you can ask questions below, and as always, it is wise to take in front of you the correct chapter, that's chapter 3, and the correct paragraph, that's paragraph 1. That is named also different types of government. So it would be smart to take that paragraph and that chapter in front of you. And for the persons who've never seen my videos before, I've added a logo of the Caribbean Examinations Council because my topic of this video connects to the syllabus of the Caribbean Examination Council and what they want of you. So if you're new, this video also connects to the program of the Caribbean Examinations Council. And we are talking about different kinds of government, mainly in the Caribbean, but also applicable to the rest of the world too, because these systems of government, they are universal. They're in Europe, they're in Africa, they're in Asia, they're everywhere. And the learning outcome of the video that I'm presenting to you now, the learning outcomes is as following. At the end, you will be able to differentiate. That's the learning verb, the behavior verb of this video. You have to make the difference, differentiate, onderscheiden, in Hollandes, yeah, distinguish among the types of government systems in the Commonwealth Caribbean, but broadly speaking, in the Caribbean, because we have them here on the island of Curacao too. So differentiate among the types of government systems in the Commonwealth Caribbean, but more broadly speaking, differentiate among the types of government systems in the Caribbean. And again, this video is also applicable to the CXC system, but also outside of it. And I'm working for the Sky, that's the Sky University. In the last video, we did the following. We talked about interests of citizens of countries, and sometimes they correlate, they go together, sometimes they compete, what is the most important, health or the economy, or sometimes they conflict with each other. The interests, the interest on the interest of citizens, the interest on the ciudadano. Oh ja, die interesse aan die ciudadano, timbia te bij huntu, timbia te compete, en timbia nangta un conflicto. They conflict sometimes. After that, we talked about how you can solve it. A society solves this by creating norms. These are the unwritten rules how people should treat each other. A norm is, for instance, when we meet each other, we do a box. When we see a person we know in the neighborhood or during shopping. Another way of solving this is creating legislation, creating written rules, creating them in the assembly, in the parliament. And the government is mainly responsible for creating solutions, creating policies, creating legislation for in the interest of people, the interest ng the ciudadano, in the interest of the people, the citizens of a country. The government makes the legislation, writes the rules, and also creates policies, plans to bring the different interests of the people in a country together. We have in the Caribbean different kinds of governments. We have republican governments, we have constitutional monarchies, we have crown colonies in the Caribbean, and in our island, we have a prime minister. As I speak now, January 2025, we have Gilmar Pisas, but our head of state is not Gilmar Pisas. Our head of state is Erei, the king, koning Willem-Alexander. The king, our king, nos rei ta rei Willem-Alexander, the Oranje Nassau. Our king of Curaçao, our head of state is Willem-Alexander. He is the king of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, of which the country of Curaçao is a part of. That we talked about in the former video. You can check that if you didn't see that already. Then we're going to talk in this video about the concept of a crown colony. A crown colony. We're going to talk about that in this video. A crown colony. And a crown colony is and was a type of administration. And administration is like more or less the same as a kind of government. Yeah? Who collects the taxes, who spends the taxes, who creates legislature, who creates the laws, who writes the laws. Another word for that is administration. Under the British Empire. And what is the idea? The colony gave up its selected assembly and right to government. So this is something the colony gave up. Yeah? The colony gave up the Assemblea Elegii. And that means they gave up the fact that each 4 years or 5 years, the people in the colony could vote for an elected assembly. This is something they gave up. The colony gave up its selected assembly and right to government. The government comprised a governor, an executive council, and a legislative council. So the government comprised a governor, an executive council, and a legislative council. These three parts. And the council were made of officials who headed government departments in the colonies, together with members, and this is important, nominated by the governor. So the colony gave up elected assembly and right to government, and instead of that, there came members nominated by the governor. Yeah, so they gave up Assemblea Elegii, which was voted for each 4 or 5 years, and instead of that, they got members nominated by the governor instead of that. That is what crown colony is. The governor had executive, legislative, and judicial powers. It had everyday power, it had the power to write laws, and it had power to speak as a judge and to punish people in the form of a fine, a boot, or a castigo, ding prison, sera prison. They could also put them into prison. Nós chamamos esse aqui ding papiamento, sera prison. These three powers, executive, legislative, and judicial, gave the governor a large amount of authority, like you can see here. These three powers, executive, legislative, and judicial, meant that a lot of power was put in the hands of the governor. A lot of power was put in the hands of the governor. And he administered policies from his authority as a governor and laws. Yeah? So if new laws were needed, he could write them and could put them before the assembly. Yes? So he could write new laws and he could put them before the assembly. And the different core councils, the different assemblies were advisory and they had no power themselves. So they had expert knowledge about money, they had expert knowledge about laws, they had expert knowledge about policies, but they were advisory and they had no power themselves. So although the assemblies had some expert knowledge about money, about statistics, about creating new laws, they had no power themselves whatsoever. So this is important to keep in the back of your mind. Put into a diagram, like you can see here. Like you can see here, it's kind of a diagram. It's a simplified version of what I just told you. So the diagram below that you can see there, you can see the crown. It was a crown colony, so the king or queen had a lot of power over the crown colony. It gave up its elected assembly. Yeah, this is something they gave up. It gave up their elected assembly. And instead of that, they named a governor. The crown, the king or the queen nominated the governor, appointed the governor, that at its turn also appointed an assembly. But this assembly was nominated. This assembly was placed there by the governor. It was an appointed house, like you can see here. The house was appointed. And appointed means it was nominated. It was not chosen by the citizens. It was not chosen and nominated nos temos aqui em papiamento, nombrar, of nos temos aqui nominado. So the elected assembly was not elected anymore. It was an assembly appointed by the governor. Nós temos aqui nombrado em papiamento. It was appointed or nominated by the governor. Nós temos aqui em papiamento nominado. So this is very important to keep in the back of your head. Yeah, the crown had a lot of power over the crown colony. The crown appointed, nominated the governor, was loyal to the crown, and the governor, at its turn, nominated an assembly that was not elected, but he chose persons that were loyal to the governor and at their turn loyal to the crown, that had some expert knowledge, that were smart people, that had knowledge about money or about agriculture or about policy, but they were nominated, nombra, by the governor, nominado, nombra, by the governor. I hope this was like a good repetition of what I just told. To end this video, British crown colonies have been reclassified as British overseas territories. So they're not British crown colonies anymore, officially by name, but the form of government still reflects that of a crown colony. So practically speaking, how it's governed didn't change all that much. Yeah? The form of government still reflects that of crown colony government. So the form still reflects of what was there before. So the name changed, but the content not so much. Montserrat and Turks and Caicos Islands are examples of British overseas territories in the Caribbean. So we see here Montserrat, which is part of the Lesser Antilles. And we see here of the Turks and Caicos Islands, what is an island group of its own. They are both overseas territories, and the form of government still reflects that of a crown colony government. And these two islands and island groups that you see here still are overseas territories and governed like it used to be a crown colony, these two. And by the way, Britain has more around the world. These are just British overseas territories in the Caribbean. But worldwide, Britain has more. For instance, it has here St. Helena, the place where Napoleon was sent to when he lost the battle at Waterloo. But here you also have a British Indian Ocean territory. So around the world, they have more of these. But in the Caribbean, they have Montserrat, and they have the Turks and Caicos Islands as overseas territories. I hope this video is very helpful, and one of the exam tips I would suggest to you is that you have to be familiar with the structure of government and the regional variations within the Caribbean. For instance, in this video, that of overseas territories, that still reflects that of the former crown colonies in the Caribbean and around the world. So this is a big exam tip that's also present in the study guide of social studies for CSEC. Then the key points. To wrap up this video, the key points that we talked about was 1 and 2. 1 is a government is a group of people who have the authority to set goals and make policies, make laws and regulations, and enforce compliance with the laws and regulations. So these 3 are the key points we talked about in this video and the video before. And what we also talked about in this video in specific, under Crown Colony, like that of the Turks and Caicos Islands and that of Montserrat. Under Crown Colony, what is now called overseas territories, the governor had executive, legislative, and judicial power. The governor had executive, legislative, and judicial power under Crown Colony, what is now called overseas territories. I hope you found this video very helpful about Crown Colony and the authority of the governor. You see him, the governor? So under the Crown Colony and the authority of the governor, like you can see here. If you have questions, you can ask them below. Keep in mind the learning outcomes, differentiate among the types of government systems in the Caribbean. And I hope to see you soon during class or in another video. You can subscribe here. And if you're going to go to the next video, there is a link to the side of this screen by which you can go to the next video. For now, a very well meant goodbye.